In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw in full color using just 3 pens filled with yellow, blue, and red ink. This technique is new to me and I'm still experimenting with it, but I think the results are promising and might be of interest to those that love to draw in pen and ink and are looking for an expressive way to add color to their drawings. Using a limited palette of 3 primary colors is a fairly common practice in painting media and is actually good training in color mixing before moving on to more complex color palettes. However, in painting, the colors are mixed before they're applied. With this technique, I have each ink in a separate pen, so the only way I'm going to be able to blend the colors and control their saturation and value is by putting down overlapping layers of hatch. Here's a color wheel that I did using this technique. The blue I'm using here is actually cyan, a color which pushes a little bit more towards the green, which makes the purple secondary color a little bit muddy. The other 2 secondary colors, the orange and the green, are very nice and vibrant, however. Neutral colors can also be attained by balancing the 3 colors together. While the color wheel demonstrates the potential of this technique to produce a wide range of colors, the color range is not really the most important aspect here, because the appearance of full color can be attained with a very limited palette. This drawing using the 3 crayon technique, a method of working on tone paper using just 3 colors, a dull red, white, and black, gives the impression of full color. Such drawings prove that I don't need a huge color range. What I do need is enough control over my media to make delicate shifts in value, color, and saturation. For this drawing, I'm using 3 waterproof inks made by DeAtramentis. In my previous experiments with this technique, I used water-soluble inks, and in the later stages of my drawing, when I had put down quite a few layers, I found that the inks re-wetted and blended into each other. Waterproof ink allows my layers of hatching to stay sharp and distinct. This is Document Red, this is Document Yellow, and this is Document Cyan. I place these inks into very nice pens made by Opus 88. These 2 are the Opus 88 Halo, and this one is an Opus 88 Picnic, a pen that as far as I can tell has been discontinued. All 3 of these pens have extra fine nibs in them, which is a good thing because it lets me put down very fine layers of hatch. Since mixing colors will require quite a few layers, I needed a drawing surface that stood up to a lot of abuse. This is a smooth, sturdy multimedia paper, the 300 series mixed media paper made by Canson. Let me show you how this technique works. Initially, I wasn't sure what color to start with. The yellow is very pale, to the point that you can't really see it, so that was out of contention. I could have started with either red or the blue, and I chose the blue perhaps because it allows me to deal with the values before starting with the color. I'm working light here, putting in a few shadows in the darker areas, and while I don't know exactly what I'm doing here, past experience working with other transparent media, such as watercolor, has taught me to work light to dark, and not to place strong darks too early. At this stage, it's difficult to know how dark those darks really need to go, so I'm being careful. The most important thing here is to make sure the shadows are in the right place and have the right shape. The light blue hatching establishes the structure of the drawing, which will guide me through the process. In the next step, I decided to go over the entire drawing with a light hatch of red, establishing the red color everywhere other than the highlights, which I'm going to leave white. This is an initial color layer, so I didn't put too much attention to the direction of the hatch. The plan is to put down a hatch in a more or less single direction at this point, curving it slightly here and there, and then paying more attention to carving the specifics of the form with hatching in subsequent layers. One thing that helped me work very light here is flipping the nib upside down, which is called reverse writing in some circles. This allows you to put down an extra fine line. The plan was to generally use reverse writing, using the pen upside down in some of the lighter areas, and using it right side up in the shadows. Once I added the red, I went back into the drawing with more blue to build up the contrast, and then another layer of red to increase the saturation of the skin tones. At this point, I also started adding more red into the shadows where we have warmer reflections. As you can see, I'm pretty far into the drawing, and I still haven't added my yellow. There's an important reason for this. The main difficulty in working in color is that you have to consider value, color, and saturation all at the same time, and this can be a difficult juggling act. Working in 2 colors only allows me to focus just on getting the drawing right, without having to think about getting the colors right as well. This is why it's a good idea to start with just 1 color, the blue, then add the red, and then wait until you're pretty far into the drawing to add the yellows, which I'm going to do right now. The yellow ink is so pale that I couldn't really see the individual strokes. It did, however, immediately give the drawing a full color effect that to my mind was almost magical. The way sometimes when you're drawing, a form appears flat until you add a little tiny detail to the shadow and then it starts to pop and appear three-dimensional. This is really what makes this three-color technique so fun. It doesn't feel like you can achieve a full color effect with just 3 inks, so there's something very satisfying when your drawing actually starts to feel like it's in full color. At this stage, the drawing still needs more contrast and saturation, and I'm alternating between both tasks, carefully adding contrast with blue, and then using the yellow and red to add saturation. One thing that really helped with achieving the full color effect is to also deal with the areas next to the head. As soon as I eliminated some of the white areas on either side, the skin tone became much more convincing. When working in color, there are 2 important principles to consider. The first is that white interferes with the ability to read color correctly, since every color you put next to it will look dark and muddy. This is why many instructors will tell you to work on toned surfaces, or if you do work on white, to paint over that white right away. This principle applies to this technique as well, and as soon as I put in a little bit of the background, the skin tone started to look much brighter and more colorful. The second principle is that we perceive color in relation to other colors. This means that it's very difficult to accurately identify a color in isolation from the colors around it. This is why instructors will tell you to roughly block in all the colors in your painting before committing to any detail. This principle applies here as well. A little background color allows me to better gauge whether the skin tones are correct and to make more accurate adjustments. I'm close to finishing this drawing and I'm fairly pleased with the results. And while I'm nowhere near feeling like I have any kind of mastery over this technique, I've used it over a long enough period of time to offer some advice to those of you interested in giving this a try. The first tip is the inks. Even though I bought waterproof inks for this purpose, I don't think it's entirely necessary. Regular water-soluble inks will give the same degree of sharpness through most of the drawing process and only start blending into each other where there are very many layers of hatch. The most important factor in choosing inks seems to be the value of the ink and not the specific color. Any red, blue, and yellow ink will work to create a broad enough color range, but they should be on the lighter side so you can build your saturation and values gradually. This is the mistake I made in this drawing. The inks used here are Noodler's Blue, Diamine Poppy, and Apache Sunset. Though these inks allowed me to produce a full range of color, they were too dark and didn't give me enough control over the delicate values in the lighter areas. This technique, at least the way I'm doing it, requires a lot of layering, so you will need to choose a paper that is sturdy enough to hold up to many layers of hatching with an extra fine nib. The Canson multimedia paper I used for the demo works very well, but the paper doesn't have to be quite so thick and sturdy, and the thinner paper in my Holbein Art Creation sketchbook did just as well. Just avoid medium-toothed drawing papers intended for dry media, which will start to tear when abused this way. As far as the process goes, it'll obviously vary depending on the subject matter, but it's generally a good idea to put in your initial lines with blue. This will help you focus on getting the drawing and the initial value structure right and prevent you from getting distracted by the color too early. In representational art, accurate drawing and value is almost always more important than color. To prove this principle, here are 2 little watercolor portraits. The one on the left is accurately drawn, but utilizes strange colors, whereas the one on the right has accurate color, but is drawn poorly. The painting on the left doesn't suffer from the strange color choices, whereas the one on the right isn't saved by the correct color choices, and is just a bad painting. Once you've fixed the drawing in blue, go over the whole thing in red, being careful to avoid areas of highlight. Then I would alternate between working in red and blue until the drawing is somewhere in the middle of completion before putting in the yellow. Again, this is to keep the color relatively simple, freeing your brain to focus on getting the values right. Like any complicated task, making art requires you to think about many things at once, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. Breaking the process down into smaller steps allows you to focus on each small task more effectively. This process of breaking things down is an important part of mastery, and it's something I always think about whenever I'm making a picture. Here's the final drawing. While it could definitely have been taken further, I think I brought it to a stage of completion where you can see the effectiveness of this technique. Again, I think the results here are promising, and I look forward to seeing what I can do with much more practice. I hope you found this demo and tutorial useful, and that it inspired you to give this technique a try. If you do, let me know how it went, and if you found something that improved on what I've showed you. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them below, and I'll be happy to reply.